Hey everyone, welcome back to the Outcomes Rocket Founder Stories. I'm so excited to have you all join us again because today I've got a very special guest. His name is Colin Lawlor, and if you've been listening to our podcast since the beginning, the name sounds familiar, or if you're in the sleep health business, the name will sound familiar. He is the Chief Executive Officer at SleepScore Labs. He's a wellness and sleep veteran, and he's a passionate believer in the power of technology to connect the dots and drive better health outcomes. His career has spanned over 30 years, having worked at ResMed, BiancaMed, and biomedical research. He's leading firms in the sleep science and wellness space, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. He was a guest back in 2018 on the Outcomes Rocket, 2 years into our journey, and so glad to have him back. Colin, welcome.
Hey, so delighted to be back, and it honestly feels like I've blinked since the last time we were on the show. So,
oh my God,
that's incredible. Where does that time go, huh?
It's incredible. So we're in 2024 now. That was 6 years ago. So a lot has happened. Colin, you and I had a chance to catch up before this podcast to really kind of think about, the discussion. And I had a lot of fun with our catch-up session. And now it's time to catch up our listeners. So for the people that haven't had a chance to get to know you, help them understand what got you into healthcare and why did you decide to be an entrepreneur?
Oh, cool. Let me go back to the very beginning to help answer that question. I started my life in consumer marketing in the beer business, a certain little Irish company called Guinness, right?
Nice.
And an amazing, amazing company. I learned an enormous amount, but it wasn't fulfilling for me, right? I felt like I wanted to make a difference. So I spent quite a number of years in management consulting in a couple of other areas. And then I joined my first company in the health and wellness area, biomedical research. And there I found my home because really at the end of the day, to me, there's business, there's growing a business, there's driving a business and being successful. But the sweet spot for all of us in the health space, it's about making a difference at the end of the day to people's lives and to health, right? Yes. And so to me, that is the most motivating and important challenge, right? There are 8 billion people on the planet, 4 billion waking up tired every day. There's a continued growth in pretty much every major chronic disease. The healthcare systems all around the world are struggling to solve the problem. So when you look at it, the outlook, even though there's been tremendous achievement in many, many areas of health, the outlook is a real challenging environment. So that's a place where I really believe there's an opportunity to make a difference. And so hence, that's what gets me out of bed every morning, if you forgive the pun.
I love that. I love it. So good. And look, sleep is a critical piece of every single comorbidity, chronic condition out there. And we're going to unpack this a little bit more and the meaningful work that Colin and his team is doing in research, but also in interoperability and data. So Colin, help us really understand the business. What are you guys up to at SleepScore Labs and how are you adding value to the healthcare ecosystem?
Well, I think it starts, as it always does when you think about it. If you want to manage any problem, you have to be able to measure it. So we set out on our journey many years ago, starting with how to measure it. The great news today is that there are many, many different ways to measure sleep, right? And inside that, once you've got the ability to measure it, then it's about learning what affects it and what changes it, right? To your point about comorbidities and so forth, when I started my journey in the sleep space, sleep was for wimps. Right? 14 years ago, you were a hero if you pulled an all-nighter. It was a badge of honor to walk around the office as the guy that slept least and worked hardest. And that is where we were coming from. And we had a belief right from the very beginning that better sleep could deliver better outcomes. But we actually had to explain that at the time, right? We had to educate people.
Yeah.
And since we started in that work, ResMed itself and the founder in particular, Peter Farrell, he had a tremendous simple statement, which was ignorance is our greatest competitor, right? And even though at that time, ResMed's number one competitor was Philips, the truth was it was ignorance. And so what has happened since then has been really transformative. Now people get it. But I still get asked a question from time to time, which is it the chicken or is it the egg? What role does sleep play in health, right? Does poor sleep cause chronic disease or does chronic disease cause poor sleep? Truth is, there's certainly a bidirectional relationship, but we are getting better and better and better in terms of the science and understanding the causative effect of poor sleep pretty much every area of chronic disease. So literally in the last 6 months, there have been a bunch of the new landmark studies further illustrating this as if people don't already know. But just to highlight 3 points, a person age 60, for every 1% change in deep sleep, right? So that's typically 1 to 2 minutes. So a 1 to 2 minute change in the amount of deep sleep to the negative has a 27% increased risk of Alzheimer's and dementia, right?
Wow.
There is now another landmark study done in type 2 diabetic populations. Even when diet is controlled, if sleep is not, it is very difficult to actually control blood sugar levels, right?
Yeah.
We know the relationship between poor sleep and mental health and so forth. So our hypothesis from the beginning has been that sleep is a driver of better or worse outcomes. And so therefore, understanding how people sleep and then helping them to sleep better is a critical part of delivering outcomes in almost every area of health, right? I actually believe, as we are looking at this more and more, the great and tremendous investments in building digital health platforms, right, in mental health to support people with cardiovascular disease and oncology and so forth. All of those platforms are doing great work, but every one of them struggles with how do I engage people and how do I further improve the outcomes from my digital health platform? And I believe, based on the data, and we believe based on the data, that the missing ingredient is you're ignoring the effect of sleep. Let me give you one more little statistic here, which is really key. Published in The Lancet very recently. The timing of the therapeutic intervention, if it's timed in line with the chronobiology or the kind of natural circadian rhythm of the individual, if it's timed optimally, the effect on outcomes is up to 40% greater. So I tell you what, listen, I don't want to be treated at the wrong time to get suboptimal outcomes. And how do we know, right?
And Colin, is this one about radiation?
No, this one's about chemotherapy.
Chemotherapy.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And not only is the timing of chemotherapy very important for the outcomes, but it's also very important for the side effects. And, personally in this space, I'm sorry, I've lost 2 of my parents in the last number of years, both to cancer. I did not know that. I sat with my mother waiting for her chemo in a hospital in Dublin, 4 hours late at 5 p.m. I didn't know. I had no idea. So the key for me is, look, these are not enormous interventions. What this is about is leveraging the data and the insights about how a person sleeps, about their circadian rhythm to direct and drive better outcomes in every aspect of their care. So my contention is, if you are ignoring sleep and you are in any one of those fields, you are leaving outcomes on the table and you are not delivering the best in care. So what we have to do, and this is what we now do, is we have made all of our insights, all of our technology, all of our research available in a suite of very, very simple to implement and integrate software tools. So you don't have to go figure sleep out all by yourself. We're happy to provide our technology, the SleepScore Insight technology, for you to add that to your platform. And
that's great.
Basically, that's our vision. Our vision is you cannot help a person to get best outcomes without taking sleep into account. And for the most part, unless you've got a very strong evidence-based, data-based approach to sleep, you are not going to do a good job with it. So putting those 2 things together, making those available to your patients, to your consumers, to your customers in all of those areas of health and wellness, that's what we have in mind. And that's what we've been building.
That's outstanding, Colin. Congratulations on the advancements that you and the team have made, not only on the research side of things, but also on the business model. As you've grown and evolved, you sort of have what it sounds like now have a data-based business that enables connectivity, and anybody with health apps, which is, how many are out there? Like
more than 350,000 health apps out there.
So the market's huge. And for look, guys, gals, you guys are running these companies. You're listening to this. Do you currently have a validated, tested, and research-backed way to really measure sleep within your app? If the answer is no, you got to be taking Colin's information, because he and his team have it for you. The APIs, as I understand, are in place to be able to leverage this data. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Look, what we've figured along this pathway, we started with our own technology, our own proprietary technology, developed in BiancaMed, improved in ResMed, and spun into SleepScore Labs.
I remember
And
you sent me one. I had it next to my bed. It was the little black device.
that's the one. That's
Yeah,
the one.
yeah.
And we started with that device and started to collect data, right? And then we made a breakthrough because we developed new technology to convert a typical smartphone into a biomotion sensor using sonar, not audio, sonar. So measuring biomotion, respiratory pattern, basically body movement, respiratory pattern, etc., by converting the smartphone into a biomotion sensor. That meant...
Hey, Colin, I have a quick question on that because that's super intriguing.
Yeah.
So is sonar built into the phone or is it an attachment?
No, it's we just commandeer the speaker and the microphone in a typical smartphone to send out sound waves to measure the response times. It's not listening to audio. There's nobody somewhere in the center kind of, machine learning, listening to your conversations. It's simply using sound waves to measure respiratory movement.
Incredible.
And so we built that technology. What that enabled us to do was to collect now 120 million hours of sleep data from people with all sorts of issues around the world. And that is a ground truth data. And then we opened up the platform and now we take data from pretty much any major wearable or even device like a bed itself. And we've got about 500 million hours of that data.
Wow.
What that enabled us to do is to understand the relative strengths and weaknesses of each, and therefore how to use the data to help identify what the sleep issues for any given person are. So basically, we've solved all of those problems. So if you just think about this for a moment, if you have a health and wellness app, you don't have to worry about whether your customer or patient or end consumer has a particular wearable. It doesn't matter. They can have any wearable or no wearable, believe it or not.
And
we can still...
I've heard them called nearable.
Precisely. A nearable, a wearable, and in fact, for 1.2 billion people, just the iPhone itself. And, with no tracker. And we can find from the data available inside there, very, very, very good picture of a person's sleep, what the relative issues are and so forth. So all of that technology is now built into a suite of APIs and models that can be very, very easily integrated into any platform.
That's amazing. So for somebody listening to this, Colin, that wants to improve their sleep, is this something that's available to consumers or is this mainly a B2B play at this point?
Yeah, our focus is primarily B2B.
Got it.
Because what we figured out was, okay, we have to be the best in the world at something. So we can be the best in the world at consumer marketing, or we can be the best in the world when it comes to the data and the science to support better outcomes. And so our decision is we want to, and we believe the best in the world at providing this technology to other companies. That's why we've been building partnerships with really great companies in all sorts of areas, from health and wellness through to consumer products. Companies like International Flavors and Fragrances, IFF, they're on the New York Stock Exchange. We have partnerships with Mattress Firm, significant investor in the company. Of course, that makes a huge amount of sense because they sell products connected to sleep to consumers. So across the board, the focus for us is building partnerships, and we are therefore focused on building better and better data and insights from that data and more tools that can help people to sleep better. And our partners build them into their offerings and services, and that helps them to drive their businesses.
That's outstanding. Thanks for sharing that. And look, we're talking about founder stories here. We're talking about healthcare innovation. And we all know that it's not a smooth road all the time. So, Colin, what would you highlight as maybe one of your biggest setbacks to date? And what did that setback teach you that we could teach Outcomes Rocket listeners today?
Wow. Well, I think probably one of the biggest, if I could highlight that, was we started with a hardware approach. So we started by building our own sensor device. Mm-hmm. And it is the best sensor device in the world, even to this day. There isn't one which is more published and so forth. But what we realized was that isn't enough to be successful, and that isn't enough to make the difference, because by definition, unless 4 billion people buy that sensor, which of course is a huge business, we're not going to reach people at scale. So what we had to do is to ask ourselves, how else can we derive the insights necessary to help a person? How else can we do that? And I think that's ultimately where we've now ended up, because ultimately, consumers have their preferences. Some people want to wear their wearable device on their wrist, so other people on their finger, and there's hundreds of such devices, right? Other people don't want to wear any device, but they're happy to have a bed that tracks data. And other people have nothing at all because they forget to do it, but they do have an iPhone sitting beside them every night. The point being, if you want to help them all. And what you want to do is you want to extract the most value from that data, the most insights from that data, so that you can provide the services to screen those people for disorders, to coach and personally coach and help each individual leveraging the technology. So I guess the hardest part was realizing that, look, a hardware play is not going to work. And in the end, the funny thing is we ended up basically leveraging our hardware play to drive a whole new business. And that whole new business is in sleep R&D services. We help companies by enabling them to collect data and insights about how their products perform in terms of their impact on sleep quality. And we've now completed 235 studies. So those studies are really, really important, because I want to say to you, Saul, the answer isn't always only in medicine.
Yeah.
The answer is in behavior, it's in the environment, it's in the sleeping surface, and it's in medicine. It's in all of it, right? So you can't, by definition, solve a person's sleep issue by only looking at one little vertical within that. You actually have to connect the dots across all of them. And so from that perspective, what it's enabled us to do, the hardware play that we set out to leverage as the driver of the business, ended up being an enabler of a different business. But also it pushed us into thinking about how can we leverage data that's already accessible and available.
Totally. Hey, Colin, that's so interesting, right? And it's waking up to that fact of where the market's going and having the guts, right? Because the whole thesis was we have hardware, there's 4 billion units, and this is the market. And now you shifted to, no, it's actually different. And I have a question for you on that, just a little nuanced question. So with this sleep study business, did you initially start with deploying the capital units and then evolve to not even having to?
Yeah. I mean, for the sleep study business, yes, in essence, we started by deploying the units for the sleep studies. And actually, we still use units for a lot of sleep studies.
Okay.
But we now collect data from anything and everything. So, right. So what we have learned, I mean, this is where the new technology, AI, ML models, that's really key, because it's about combining the data from all of those sources plus other kind of proprietary approaches. And that enables us to build very, very effective predictive models. So, for example, if a person has no tracker whatsoever, but they have an iPhone, there is information collected about when they put the phone down every night, how many times they pick it up during the night, when they get up in the morning, and so forth. And if they're happy to share that data and answer a couple of particular proprietary questions, we can help that person with a very, very quick, immediate insight. And so to us, it's all about leveraging the data that's available, minimizing the impact on the consumer or the patient, and packaging all of that so that it can be easily integrated into the health and wellness services that those companies are using. But the data is really critical, and it's now becoming very, very, very exciting. And that's the key. Like, 500 million hours of that data is great. And a lot of people have a lot of data. But the problem that people have with data is, how do I get quality data that I can really use? And that's not easy. And so if you're building and training AI models, for example, to coach and train to help personally coach an individual, the data that you feed into that model is really, really important. We know that an LLM, which is trained by scraping the web, is not going to give a person good advice, right? We also know from our own research, which, spoiler alert, we'll be publishing relatively soon, an LLM is also not capable of taking a data set and truly understanding that when it comes to sleep. We don't know about other health fields, but when it comes to sleep, it's not by itself. But LLMs are still incredibly valuable tools in parts of the chain. So for us, the key here is, when it comes to a person's sleep, it's too important for it to be left to guesswork, snake oil, and insufficient data. So what we have to do, and what we focus on doing, is bringing the data and the science to understand exactly how a person is really sleeping and what we can do to guide and help them. And that's the key. So I think that in the broader picture, and as we're talking about trends right now,
Mm-hmm.
there is absolutely no doubt that the leveraging of AI tools is key. And we have been leveraging AI tools basically since the very beginning. We even acquired a company called Sleep.ai in 2017 or 18.
Yeah.
So, we've been doing that from the very beginning, but with guardrails. You can't allow the models, the model is not capable of achieving the outcomes all by itself.
Well, we look forward to getting this new research from you, Colin, the work that you guys have done around the AI models and in sleep. So we're excited to get that when it's hot off the press. And I got to tell you, I always enjoy connecting with you. This has been an incredible opportunity to hear the advancements in your journey and the company's journey. What closing thought would you leave us with? And if anybody wants to get in touch, where can they do it?
I think this is both personal and business, right? So I tried to think about something in terms of a closing thought, and you used the phrase, I'm going to repeat it. It's wake up to sleep, right? Wake up to sleep. For the personal level, I have witnessed it myself. Please don't ignore it. Every 1 minute makes a difference. Figuring out how to add that minute to this minute to the other minute is the difference between, I believe, later in life being very sick or not, or being less sick. And I think from a personal point of view, wake up to sleep. From a business point of view, every one of your customers, every one of your patients sleeps or sleeps poorly, and you don't know. But believe it or not, the difference between those two things has an outsized impact on how they engage and the outcomes that you can achieve with them. So you have to include sleep. By ignoring it, you are actually putting differences in terms of outcomes of 30 and 40%, you're making them unavailable to your patient or consumer. You can't do that any longer. You can't ignore it. We will be delighted to help, of course, and that's our business. And you can find us at sleepscore.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Colin J. Lawlor. And look, we'd be delighted to help regardless. But the mission is clear. We believe if we can help people to sleep better, we can deliver better outcomes. But also we believe that we cannot do it alone, and nobody can do it alone. There's 4 billion people to help. And so it's about connecting dots and working with people. And that's why we make the technology that we put all this blood, sweat, and tears into available so that other companies don't have to put the blood, sweat, and tears into figuring it out. Instead, they can go do it and make the difference and deliver the outcomes.
Amazing, Colin. Well, I'm inspired, and I know the listeners are too, about just the depth at which you've approached this topic of sleep. You left me with the thought that, hey, you got to control the controllables in business and in health. And with SleepScore, you could control sleep. So measure it, make a difference. As Colin says, wake up to sleep and do something about it in your business and in your life. Colin, this has been so great. Grateful that you came back on and looking forward to staying in touch.
Thanks a lot, Saul. And thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Sleep well.
That's right. Sleep well.